Anybody else? Sir, please. Your name?
Austin.
Austin.
Well, currently I'm working on a job where I sell photos to sort of companies and through emails and whatnot.
Okay.
And it's definitely relationship based in that sense.
Okay. So do you go out and interact one-on-one with your prospect?
No, I kind of branch out through the connections that I've made and figure out how to like get into like team managers of companies who are in advertising for these places and figure out their emails and reach out to them via email.
Okay.
Sometimes they reply, sometimes they don't. Usually you have a photo of one of their writers that you're trying to sell to them.
Okay. How long have you been doing this?
Now like 6 years.
Okay. Good for you. All right. On that note, does anyone in here who has a parent who is a sales professional that works in sales? Okay, two real quick. Yours?
My dad works for Verizon. He's like a senior client son.
Okay.
Like that, yeah.
So he works in the selling, or does he manage salespeople? Or?
Yeah, now he does.
Okay, but he was in
He
selling
yeah,
at one time.
for Microsoft.
Okay, all right, and you?
He currently works for Ovum as a global sales director.
Okay. Did he encourage you to take this class?
I kind of grew up taking a sales course just from talking with him about his job daily. So this is
Okay.
kind of like, we joke that's a refresher course.
Okay, and what's your name?
Jasmine?
Jasmine? What would you say as far as anything that, I believe often children are byproducts of their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And if you grow up in an environment where someone's a sales professional, you often walk in those steps, much like many children become physicians if their parents are physicians, attorneys, CPAs, whatever it may be. What would you say that you've learned from a selling perspective from your father and him being in sales? Is it taught you anything?
It's taught me to be a good communicator.
Okay.
To be extremely organized
Okay.
with it, especially when dealing with either members of a team or with clients.
Okay. I'm going to abbreviate your communicator. And then we heard Leaky, is that right?
Yeah.
Leaky said customer relations. Okay. All right. Thanks for sharing. Thank you for sharing, Austin. So I want to share a story with you that happened to me in 1989, probably long before many of you were ever walking on the earth. I had the privilege, and I say privilege, to interact with two gentlemen who were in sales, and what they did was the exact same thing. They got paid by the exact same employer. Their job functions were exactly the same. They worked on a quota-based system. Okay? What they did was basically exactly the same. One gentleman's name was Eddie. The other gentleman was named Jim. Now again, what Eddie and Jim did was the same. Okay? The difference was how they approached their sales position, how they approached their potential customer or prospect. In dealing with Eddie, and again, I'm going to write this up here because I was 19 years old. They're both, by the way, they're both involved in human capital acquisition. Eddie worked for the Navy Reserves, and Jim worked for the Air Force Reserves. My first interaction before I met Jim was with Eddie. And Eddie was dialed into a station I like to say was all about himself, WIIFM, what's in it for me. I'm going to write this up because in dealing with sales professionals, or I like to say salespeople in this case, I see a lot of this. In my business, I recruit for sales companies. And I'm looking for certain qualities in salespeople before I'll present them to my client. My client is the business. Okay? If someone's tuned into what's in it for me, we're pretty much done unless within a minute or 2 minutes they can convince me otherwise that That's really wasn't their intent in our conversation. What Eddie did was this. He never asked about my goals, what I wanted, where I wanted to be in 2 to 3 years, why I was actually even calling him about entering into a military component. He was worried about one thing, meeting his quota. And it became very apparent very quick that that was Eddie's objective. He called me nonstop. Let me just put this up. He called me nonstop. He pressured me to take a role in the Navy that he wanted me to take. It was not about what my skills were applicable toward or what I wanted to do long term. The Navy Reserves was going to pay for my education, so it's very important for me. Right? So again, Eddie was dialed into what's in it for me. I actually ended up, because of an experience I had about 5 years earlier with a used car salesman, when I went with my mom to a used car dealership, Eddie reminded me of that person immediately. So I knew based on that experience at a very young age, I didn't want to deal with that. Okay? About a month after, I still wanted I wanted to serve the country, and I wanted to pay for my education doing it. So I called Jim through the Yellow Pages, which no longer exists, but Jim was not tuned in to WII-FM. He didn't really care what was in it for him. Ultimately, I think he was, because again, he was on a quota system, much like Eddie was. Jim sat me down. He asked me about myself, what I wanted to accomplish in being a part of his family. He called it his family. He took me and introduced me to the potential people I'd be working with in the reserve component. He took me back, he went over the educational benefits, the GI Bill, the state-sponsored scholarships. He told me what my role would be if I joined, what I'd have to do for my training, and when I'd start. So Jim, although he may have been tuned into this, because again, he was on a quota-based system, I never knew. He cared about me. Okay? So ultimately what happened, Jim changed my life because he was a great sales professional. I ended up being a part of that military unit. And again, I used this prior, it changed the trajectory of my life as well. It gave me many opportunities I wouldn't have had, and I probably wouldn't be standing here in front of you today if I hadn't have met Jim. The reason I tell you this, in sales, and it's not about what you sell all the time, it's about how you sell. And how you sell is really focusing on a lot of these things. Interpersonal skills, if you're organized, customer relationships, all of those things are very important. But I'll tell you, there's a book that I read recently, and I'm not telling you to read this. I think you actually need to have some sales experience before you do it. But it's called Sales EQ, and it's written by a guy named Jeb Blunt. Probably the best book in selling, and I've read a lot of books in selling. Best book I've ever picked up. And I'll tell you why. It brought me back to this story. And Jeb in the book says, there's 5 reasons that people buy from you. And it goes right back to what Jim and Eddie did right and what they did wrong. I'm not saying Eddie's a bad person. Eddie just didn't approach his job the way that I would expect in order to earn my business. Because me joining a military component and committing 8 years of my life, that's a sales job. Okay? Here's what Jim did differently in every part of his process. He wanted to make sure that I liked him. So when you're selling to someone, they're going to wonder, do I like you? Very basic, right? Do you listen to me? Okay. Do you make me feel important? Again, he made me feel important because he sat down with me and talked to me. He never did. he was wondering, you know what his question was? When can you start? He wanted to know, how can I help you? He was interested in me, which made me like him. Made me listen to him. And he made me feel important. Most importantly, he solved a problem. This is probably the single biggest one. You always have to solve a problem. Would you agree, Austin?
Yeah.
And what you're selling, you're solving someone's problem, right?
Yeah.
Providing a solution that hopefully benefits them. And that's why they listen to you, right? Okay. Last thing is, do I trust you? I'm going to go back to what I said prior. I didn't trust him because he reminded me of a used car salesperson that I sat with my mom when I was in my early teens and watched pressure and really not there to help her, there to help himself. And it was actually a horrifying experience. And I remember that to this day. And I always said I never wanted to be like that used car guy. Right? I didn't know I was going to be doing what I was doing at the time. I was 14 years old. But I knew I never wanted to be like him. And Eddie reminded me of him because Eddie didn't follow these 5 simple steps of, did he want me to like him? Did I listen to him? Did he make me feel important? Did he solve my problem? And ultimately, if people don't like you and they don't trust you, let me use some improper English. They ain't buying from you. Okay? They're not going to buy from you. Period. Again, I'm going to say it's not what you sell, it's how you sell, and that's what differentiated those two gentlemen. All right. Any questions on anything regarding this? Yes, I love it. Jasmine,
so,
right?
Yep.
Okay.
So for those questions, how do you make it seem genuine without like seeming fake?
I love it. Did everybody hear what she asked? She's asking about authenticity, which is key in selling. Authenticity. You have to take yourself out of the equation because people are not stupid. And I can tell you something. Since I started selling in 1993, the buyer's landscape has changed completely. You know why? Technology. The seller used to have all the information. No matter what you bought, the seller had all the information. Car dealership, okay? Seller had all the information. I worked in vacation ownership sales for 8 years. Seller had all the information. Now, the buyer has just as much, if not more information, and comes to the potential transaction well-equipped with information. Prior, didn't have all that. So that little phone right there, or your computer at home, contains all that information. You control the process and the transaction now with that information. I'm going to answer that. I believe authenticity is number one. I'm trying to keep myself out of this as much as I can, other than sharing this story. I've never been a real high performer in any of the sales or organizations that I've worked with. I've been to President's Club trips, I've won awards. I've never been the top guy. And again, you can make excuses or reasons why you're not, but I believe that a part of what kept me from being that person, or that number one person, was just that. I always wanted what was best in being as genuine as I could for the people who were in front of me. And that did not elevate me to those levels, but you know what, and I hate to sound cliche, at night I slept well, and more importantly, as what Leakey said, right? Leakey, is that right? Get it right? I had repeat business. It's called extending customer life. People will call you back and do business with you. They'll refer their friends. And ultimately, that's the best gratification I think you can get. It's not the money. The money's important, and people sell for money. But ultimately, I think the best compliment you can get in sales is when someone calls you and says, hey, I got a friend that wants to transact potentially with you with what you're buying. Can I refer them to you? And they'll ask your permission. And that comes from authenticity and being genuine. So yeah, again, if you ever get into any sales arena, you're going to see court jesters, clowns. They exist in every company, okay? So But you'll also recognize the people who actually care and are there because they understand that the reason they have a livelihood and able to provide for their families is because they care about the customer first. And again, that's the difference between what Jim did and what Eddie did. He was authentic. He was gonna let me walk out, didn't care. And that's a psychology. It is. It's a selling psychology. When you don't care, people want it even more. But he was genuine about it. And he was not on any level. It was nonstop, let me put 5 or 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag. And that's what he was trying to do. Stuff me in what he wanted me to have, what he wanted to have for himself, not what was good for me. That's a great question, because I believe in that every day. And again, in asking that, I believe what I look for when I'm recruiting for a customer, the first question I ask when people get on the phone with me, I just talked to 2 people this morning about an opening I have in a financial services company. And the first question I asked was, what's the last selling book you read and what did you learn from it? And if I hear blank, again, we're done. Because it's a constant process of growth when you're in selling. You always have to be looking to be better than you were the day before. You're being better for yourself, for your family, and for the people who are sitting in front of you or who are on the other side of the telephone. You're being better for them. 3 things I look for, real simple. Purpose. You got to have purpose. It's a grind. There's a lot of peaks and valleys in selling, a lot. You can hit rock bottom one week, and you'll be at the top the next week. A lot of disruptive emotions have to be managed. And that's what Jeb talks about in his book, Sales EQ. Managing those disruptive emotions, fear, anxiety, overconfidence. So you better have a purpose, and you better make that purpose clear through clarity. The second thing is you better have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Carol Dweck talks about that, and I think you and I talked about that in her book about don't come to the table thinking because you were told as a child that you're a prodigy and you're talented and you're smart and you have a high IQ. Because very few of those things really translate into the selling arena. You better know that when you go home at night, you can always be better than the day before, whether it's listening to podcasts, reading books, having a second set of eyes watch you in a sales presentation. So always know you have to have a growth mindset versus basically a fixed mindset. And last but not least is accountability. Accountability is key. And what I say about accountability, if you work around enough salespeople in enough sales arenas, it's never their fault that they're in a rut. Never their fault. It's always my prospects aren't good, or everybody I call is saying no, or my dog bit me on the leg last night. You'll hear everything. And what they're going to do is try to drag you down with them. They'll try to take you right down with them. But if you stay focused and not let them bring you down and take accountability for absolutely everything that happens in your life and in your career. And when I say accountability, you take accountability, even though things may not work in your favor, the meaning that you attach to something not working in your favor, whether it be good or bad, positive or negative, is how you take accountability. And I look for that in salespeople. If they're not taking accountability, probably not a good candidate for most of the companies that I'm placing for. So again, purpose, growth versus fixed mindset, and taking accountability. Questions? I was hoping we had wanted to field questions. That was a great question. I love that. Yes?
So you mentioned authenticity and accountability as 2 of the things that you look for in candidates or successful salespeople. Is there a third trait that you look for?
That's a great question. And again, what I try to do is, there's a